Hey guys, thank you very much. We have reached 6,000 subscribers on our channel. It means a lot. Thanks for the support, and a lot more videos will be coming. So let's get started in this video. Hello networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, where I answer one of your questions. In this video, I want to focus and continue our conversation about things that I have learned. So I want to share and give more of that. So the last video I talked about company politics. And that was a big thing that I've learned and how to deal with that. This one, let's make it more technical, like technical hands-on things that I have learned and what has made things easier as a network engineer. So I want to focus with that in this episode. The main advantage that I realize when it comes to, for me personally, getting the technical experience, getting hands-on and doing that early on in my career and then building up to where I'm at today. A big part of that is really because of my personality. This really is, for me personally, what makes your path easier or very challenging. So for me, my major attributes as a person is that I'm very organized and very structured. So I'm very logical. I'm very methodical. I analyze things. I look at all possible combinations. You can say that it's overly cautious, but in this business, you need to be overly cautious and be aware of what you're doing. Okay, remember what I said about typing in debug commands, things like that. That was where I pretty much dropped my guard. That didn't happen again. So that's something that needed to happen, to know that you just can't be configuring things if you're not completely prepared. So for me, that's really what made things easier. So when I talk about challenges in terms of me being on the job, technically, there really was not a lot of that, because my personality is that I plan everything. I plan what I'm going to be configuring. Even early on too, though, before I even made that major mistake, I plan things out. I think about, what is my backup plan? If this happens, well, no worries. I have this as a fallback. So being organized was something that is very, very valuable and something that I do to this very, very day. Now, maybe you're not very structured or organized. Maybe things are very messy on your desktop or in your inbox. Like for my email inbox, is always empty, because I have a system for organizing my emails and how to deal with it. I actually wrote a book about that too, about being organized and structured. But when you're not organized, that means that you probably are not very used to planning and doing step-by-step stuff and analyzing the possible combinations of stuff that could happen. Now, a lot of that does require experience to understand what could happen. So just kind of keep that in mind. But I realize that your personality will dictate how easy your journey will be to become a network engineer. So for me, it has been pretty easy, for the most part, pretty easy though, because this is what I do on a day-to-day basis. I've been doing this before I was in high school, of being organized and planning things out, things like that. I wanted to be a doctor, for crying out loud. I was in middle school. I knew which high school I was going to go to. And I basically planned out what my classes would be in high school, and then what college I would be going to, and basically the classes in college. I'm in 8th grade figuring this out. That's what I'm talking about. Having that kind of perspective does make IT in general a lot easier to get through. When you're starting out, you need to gain experience. So a big part of that is you may not really have the initial confidence to say, am I doing this right before I press enter? Experience is going to improve on that confidence, okay? And one of the big things to what I did personally, that every company that I went into starting out, I always got the network diagram for that place. Like, hey, what does this network look like? How is everything connected? That helps me do my job to support the customer. And of course, I get the network diagram, and what I have always done was I would build my lab based on what that company network looked like. So if they have like this, router and all these different connections across a WAN or a LAN or a data center, that sort of thing like that, I use the equipment that I would buy. All the equipment that I bought was from eBay. At the time, a lot of older hardware. But the same thing you can do today. You can even use virtualized type software to help you emulate these networks, like GNS3, for example. But I would actually build these networks out and, based on the company's network, and I would just configure that. And I would do like maybe a ping test. And if I'm making a change or a cutover, like let's change this customer to this new network. Let's make sure that we don't bring them down. I configure stuff, go, oh crap, I brought somebody down. So let me figure out what I can do to improve that for next time. I basically pretended that I had that company network in my home. And I configured it exactly, the same IP addresses, everything. I just got more comfortable with that. If there was the configuration provided, I would get that configuration and kind of compare it to what I was configuring. So I did that all the time starting out. This means that you need to be at your home building the network. And that means investing with the equipment. That's important, okay? Investing your money with the equipment, or again, using GNS3, using that software to build out this company network, and just over and over and over and over again, you're doing configurations. But also just say, let me do a cutover. Let's add a new customer here. Let's make sure that we do not bring down these other customers. You want to just do all of that. You want to emulate possible scenarios like that, and to make sure that you're not bringing things down. Because that's what I've learned right off the bat. Practice, 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 practice for hours every single day. The more you do that, you will gain the experience. Yes, it may not be on the job experience, your roles will be different, but you are gaining confidence because you are doing repetitive things. When you keep adding a VLAN or configuring an interface or configuring routing protocols, and you do it again and again and again and again, you're going to be very, very comfortable with that. Another thing that I have learned is, what to learn. Because when you're starting out, there's a lot of things being thrown at you, things that you're learning about, new technologies, protocols, services, things like that. And a lot of that, you got to kind of figure out, what matters? And that's something that I figured out of how do I learn about new things. So I want to quickly talk about that. So for me personally, I kind of do like 4 things that I really, really care about. The first one is I want to understand the basic concepts. So let's say a routing protocol like EIGRP or OSPF. Great. What is OSPF? What are some of the basic properties of OSPF? What are some of the basics in terms of the communication or the messages that occurs between devices? Just the very basics, because that's what really matters, okay? Then I kind of figure out what are some of the best practices for that routing protocol, some of the design topologies, and how OSPF or a routing protocol should be deployed in the environment. The third thing is the configuration, which is important. And I kind of break it down to 2 different parts. There is basic configuration, then there is advanced configuration. So again, let's focus on OSPF. So it's important to understand the basic configuration of how to configure OSPF. So for me, I like to understand the order of commands. Like what command do I type in first, then second, and then last? So for OSPF, I know that I need to first enable the routing process for OSPF, and then specify a process identifier, a PID. Then I can define each network, followed by the inverse mask, then the area they will belong in based on the design, the recommended design for that routing protocol of OSPF. So that's kind of how I do things. But there's also the advanced level of configuration. Now this is more honestly optional or based on some unique requirement, that sort of thing. Or is based on some best practice or increased security, like doing passive interfaces or doing routing authentication. That is advanced level configuration. It's not required. It just increases and protects your routing environment from people injecting bad routes in the environment, which could bring things down to a halt. So those are the things that I really focus on for the configuration aspect of it. Now, the fourth part is monitoring and troubleshooting. I like to understand what are the commands that I can use for confirming that something is working based on what I configured. So if I type in some command, well, what should I see that is proven that it is working? So concepts, design, configuration, and support or monitoring. Those are the four main aspects of how I have learned everything. So when I'm doing the practice labs, day in, day out, getting comfortable with doing hands-on work, I am really using my 4-step approach to make sure, do I understand the concepts? Do I know how to design it, ideally with best practices in mind? Do I know how to configure it correctly, of course? And of course, how do I monitor to ensure that it is working? So you need to establish that kind of a baseline, because if you do not know the concepts of how it's supposed to work, if you do not know, well, what are the best practices of how that routing protocol should be configured, if you don't know basically how to configure it or how to monitor that it's working, it's going to make it very, very difficult as a network engineer, because that will be prone to mistakes. Another thing that I've learned early on, and what I mentioned during my my big mess up, and what I do today is this is something very, very valuable to me. I've been doing this for such a long time. I am very proud. I stand behind this. Prep configuration. That has been a great thing for my career since the very beginning. Okay. And when I say prep configuration, that means when there is a maintenance window or there's something that I need to configure, I actually write out the entire configuration and all the steps of what I will be doing first, second, third, fourth, and so forth. And that's great, because once I write it out, then I can actually go back and review it. And sometimes I go, oh, I can't do that, because if I do that, it's going to break this, and that sort of thing. I even have steps where once I do configuration changes, I confirm, let's make sure that this still works. That's right. I do testing and monitoring of different services, that sort of thing like that. Okay. And then I go to the next step. I have done that, and it really has helped me. It's like a guideline of what to do next, second, third, and fourth, like that. And that's what I strongly recommend for you guys. So do your prep configurations of basically what you will be doing. Another thing that is important is you want to understand what is required of you for a configuration task or maybe a project. You want to understand what is your responsibility? What is your team's responsibility for a project or a configuration related task? You want to understand, let's say, the timetable, the time frame for when that should be completed. And you should also understand what is the overall goal that we're trying to accomplish for a project or a configuration related task. You want to be aware of all of this. You want to understand what is the requirements. You want to understand what is the expectations for what needs to be configured by you. The reason why that's important, because you may be given the responsibility for, let's say, setting up a new branch office for a company. That's a big one, and something that you will likely have to do many times. Okay? Well, that's great. So now you can determine what is the expectations, what is required for that branch office. You will be given those details, because that's important, okay? Then from there, you know what to expect, and that means you can now do your prep configuration. You do step 1, step 2, step 3 of all the configuration that will be required, even for the cutover for when that actually happens. What commands will you use to monitor to ensure that everything is working based on the requirements and expectations of that project or that task? So in summary, you want to focus on those labs that you're doing, hands-on labs, doing it again and again and again every single night for several hours, even for an hour, that's perfectly fine. But doing it again and again and again, because doing that is going to make that permanent in your subconscious. Okay, you want to do that, and it's also going to help build your confidence. Imagine configuring interfaces or VLANs every single day for a year. That meant that you have done that for 365 days. You're going to get to a point that you're going to get bored, and that's a good thing. That means you're like, yes, I know how to configure an interface and VPNs and blah, 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 blah. You want to be in that state because that meant that you know it. Yes, you know it. It's repetitive. And when you're doing it on the job, it's just another day because you have done it 365 times. That's what I've learned. It made things very, very easy for me that when I was involved in doing a project starting out or configuring a new router, no biggie. I spent hours upon hours anyway doing the exact same thing. And it helped. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I didn't make any mistakes. I had things planned out in my little notes of what I'll be doing first, second, and last. So that's another thing though. Embracing the prep configuration. I'm telling you, it is a great thing. It's a good kind of blueprint for you. Kind of like a roadmap. It's probably a better word. So it's a roadmap so that you can know what to do again, first, second, and last. Being basically methodical in your approach as a network engineer. And we're done with this episode. And I will continue to share more things that I have learned growing up as a network engineer. So I have a lot more to come. But next episode will be a speed round to catch up with a lot of your great questions that you have. And speaking of questions, I want to hear from the rest of you guys. So if you have any questions about being a network engineer or anything in the networking field, post your questions below in the comments and your question will come up in a future episode on this channel. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, and also check out and support our training at routehub.net. We got a new training series that is released focused on deploying the Juniper SRX UTM next generation firewall. It's a great device. So go ahead and check it out for more details. And until next time, keep networking.